This is my Leica M2, and it's one of my favorite cameras that I've ever owned. And in this video, I want to give you my short review of the camera, talk about what I love about it, what I don't love about it, and show you a bunch of the images that I've taken during my time of ownership. So I've owned this camera since July, and I can't really tell you the exact number of film that I've shot through it, but I know it has to be at least 18 to 20 rolls. I've shot a ton of film using this camera, and I've taken some of my favorite images that I've ever taken using this camera. So this is not the first Leica that I've purchased. This is actually my third one. My first Leica was a Leica M5. I owned that camera for probably a year and a half. Loved that camera. And then after that, I had a Leica M240. That was my first and only digital M body. And finally, the Leica M2. So the reason why I keep on buying and selling Leicas is because I absolutely love shooting with them. Before I owned this, I had a Canon P. And the reason why I bought the Canon P is because I couldn't afford an M2. And the Canon P was kind of like the best option for the money at the time. And when I finally sold some stuff and had enough money to buy the M2, I sold the Canon P and bought this M2. And the biggest reason why I wanted to buy this M2 is because, again, the shooting experience that you get from a rangefinder. The Canon P was great, but it's not a Leica. It's not built as well as a Leica. It doesn't function as well as a Leica. The viewfinder isn't as clear. The rangefinder patch isn't as clear. And as great as that camera is, it's not this. You know, it's not one of these. And, you know, like I said, the reason why I have bought these and sold these in the past is, to me, I've never really gotten super sentimentally attached to a piece of equipment. I've kind of always viewed cameras and lenses and equipment like that as just equipment. And, you know, I want something really bad, so I'll try to work as hard as I can to get it. And, you know, there's always a honeymoon phase, you know. And, you know, once that honeymoon phase runs out and I see something else that I would like to have instead, I don't mind selling things to purchase other things. And that's why I sold my M5 and my M240 and all the other equipment that I had to buy this camera. Now, I didn't sell the M5 and the M240 to buy this camera. I owned those things quite a while ago. But in order to buy this camera, I sold the Canon P, my Nikon F3 kit, something else, I can't remember. Anyways, it was a couple things that I sold to purchase this camera. And the main reason why I wanted to purchase this camera is because in September, I was going on a trip to London, and I don't know, I had a really romantic idea of shooting with a Leica in Europe, and so that's what I did. I found this camera for a really good deal on Craigslist, of all places, but I had to drive like 8.5 hours in one day to pick it up. I drove like just over 4 hours from where I live to Houston, Texas, picked up the camera, and then drove just over 4 hours back, and then I had this camera in my possession. So what are the main reasons why I wanted to buy the Leica M2? The first one is the price. It definitely sits towards the bottom in terms of you know, the Leica M bodies that are available. I'd say the M5, and maybe even potentially the M1, which doesn't have a rangefinder, but those three cameras are pretty near the bottom. I paid, like I said, $1,200 for my copy. And not only the price, but the looks. I think this is just one of the most beautifully designed film cameras ever made. You know, if I had unlimited money, as much as I love this camera, I'd own a Leica MP because it looks essentially exactly the same as this camera, but it has a built-in light meter. The MP and the MA were designed really off of this camera, which, again, like I said, I think is one of the best looking cameras ever made. So the main reasons were the price and the looks, and then just the functionality. You know, I've already talked about this, but I just love the shooting experience that you get from a rangefinder. And it's hard for me to put a finger on exactly what I love about it. It's just a very, very satisfying experience, and in my experience, I haven't had a rangefinder experience from a non-Leica that compares to the rangefinder experience that you get from a Leica M body. So this right here is my other 35mm film camera. This is the Nikon F. It's an amazing camera, and I think it was made around the same time as the Leica M2, and I love this camera. It's a fantastic camera, and as much as I love it, it just doesn't compare to this. Because, again, of all the reasons that I've said, but there's just something that's so satisfying about shooting with this camera, and I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. It's the actual rangefinder itself, it's the size and the build of the camera, it's how well crafted they are, the build quality. I mean, it's like, it's just so solid. And again, not to mention how beautiful the camera is. I mean, I'm just kind of going on and on and on about this camera, but it really is an amazing camera. So now let me talk about some potential cons that I have about this camera, and they're going to go from in what I would call least egregious to most egregious. That's a really strong word. But yeah, so the first one is I'm going to say the close focus. And this is kind of like the Achilles heel on most of these M bodies. The close focus is 0.7 meters, which is okay. You know, there are workarounds to that. The next one is the film loading. Now, this one, it really isn't that big of a deal. It is a bit slower than, like, you know, the cameras that came after this, you know, starting with the M4 that had the rapid loading system. But essentially the way that you have to load it is you have a spool inside of the camera that you take out, and you attach a piece of film, a film leader, to this tab, and then you put it all back inside of the camera where you can then wind it. So when I first got the camera, it took me a second to get used to this style of loading film. I've since, I mean, I would say from probably the second or third roll that I put into the camera, I had gotten used to it. I mean, it really doesn't take very long at all to get used to it. The only thing though is it kind of is like a two-hand operation. For me personally, the most comfortable way for me to load it is to like sit down and be able to put the camera in my lap to properly lock the film leader into the spool and to load it all the way back in. Whereas with, say, something like, you know, the newer M bodies that have the rapid loading system, it's so easy to just like hold the film with one hand, stretch it over, advance it, close it, and then you're ready to shoot. But it doesn't add realistically that much time, 20, 30 seconds with practice, and then you have a new roll of film in here. And so now the final and last one has to go to the film counting system. It's kind of like on this wheel, as opposed to most other cameras, like say the Nikon F that has more of like a window. The other, you know, Leica M bodies have these windows kind of where this like circular tab sits. And I think to my knowledge, the reason why they did this is to create a cheaper alternative to the Leica M3, because this camera came after the Leica M3, and this was one of their cost-saving measures. Okay, so what's wrong with it? In short, nothing really. It works just fine. You take a picture, advance it, and it automatically moves to the next frame, which is great. It works exactly how it should. So one thing is you don't have the automatic reset. You know, with most cameras, when you take off the film back or open the film back, the camera automatically resets that counter to 0. This doesn't have that, which again, isn't a big deal. My big gripe with this camera, or sorry, with this film counting system, is it's probably happened at least 3 or 4 times throughout my ownership where my camera will be in a bag, I go to reach it, and my thumb, or my pointer finger just kind of like grazes the film counter. It's very easy to accidentally just grab it weird or grab it wrong, and all of a sudden your film or your counter just gets like all out of whack. And not too long ago, this happened where I was grabbing my camera out of my bag and I was going out to take pictures, took one picture, advanced it, took another picture, I went to advance it, and then I realized that I had no more film in my camera, where I thought I was at like shot 18. I thought I was about halfway through a roll, when in reality I had only 2 images left and I didn't have any extra film with me. And so because of that, I just wasn't able to shoot with this camera anymore because the film counter wasn't accurate. So that to me is the biggest gripe, the biggest single gripe that I have with this camera. And again, it's not the practical use of the film counter. I think it's actually a really cool, it looks really cool, it's really unique. It's just how easy it can be to accidentally just to move it, you know? And the last con that I want to mention about this camera is, again, it's not really that big of a deal and I have a solution for it, but it is fully mechanical, which is a plus in some ways. And then where that minus comes in is that there's no light meter. This is my solution to the fact that there's no light meter, and I think it looks fantastic on the camera. The chrome matches almost perfectly, but yeah, there's no light meter on this camera, so it's either use some sort of external meter, whether that be like a handheld meter or something like this, or you just use Sunny 16. And Sunny 16 is super fun to use, and I use it quite a bit, but now that I have this camera, I've been this light meter, I've been relying more on this light meter than I have been on Sunny 16. I've kind of gotten a bit lazy with Sunny 16 because this thing is just really, really convenient. But yeah, that is my solution to not having a light meter, the Kex KM02. And so yeah, those are really the only like bad things that I have to say with this camera. I think overall, it's just a camera that has made me excited to go out and take pictures. You know, whenever I've been on trips and I've brought this camera on, it's just I just want to have it in my hands the entire time. You know, I've taken a handful of trips with it. It started off with Colorado, and then London and Scotland, and most recently I went to Nebraska. Not to mention all the times that I've, you know, gone up for a weekend to visit, you know, my parents where they live. And it's just, I just want to have it, you know, with me. And I just love taking pictures with the camera. And I think that's like one of the most important things about owning a camera is actually wanting to use it. And that's what I think this camera has done for me throughout my ownership. So I did mention that this is my other film camera of choice, the Nikon F. As of right now, I only have the 55mm macro lens for it, but I'm planning on buying a 35mm so I can have like more of a standard focal length for like everyday shooting, because 35mm is my favorite focal length if I could only choose to have one lens. The reason I bring that up is it's a little bit bittersweet, but I am selling this camera and I'm selling this lens. And why am I doing that? Because I've just gone on raving about how much I love this camera and how much it's inspired me and how deeply in love with it I am, and how I've, you know, taken some of my favorite images that I've ever taken in general using this camera. So why am I selling it if I like it so much? It's kind of the same reasons why I sold my other Leicas in the past. Is Leicas are expensive, and everyone knows that. You know, the camera itself, like I said, I paid $1,200 for, and the lens, you know, it's an adapted lens. It's actually a Contax G 35mm f2 that I rehoused, and all expenses in, like the like me purchasing the metal housing and the lens was like $750. So just in this, what I'm holding in my hand was almost $2,000. And so that's the reason. It's expensive, and as much as I love this camera, that's a lot of money. You know, that's a lot of money to be tied up in one item. And so the reason why I'm selling it is so I can invest into my photography, filmmaking, and YouTube career, because that realistically, you know, that's what I want to be doing. And freeing that much money up will really go a long way into me being able to purchase other pieces of equipment that I believe will actually have more returns on investment. So if you're not new to the channel, you would have, I'm sure you would recognize this camera and lens setup. This is my GFX 50S2, and on it I have the GF 35-70. I'm not selling this camera. I am selling this lens. And like I mentioned, I paid like $750-ish for this lens. I don't think I can sell it for $750. If I can get $400 for it, I'll be really happy. So like between this camera and this lens, I really feel like I could make around $2,000-ish. You know, maybe even a little bit more than that. And with $2,000, there's so much that I could do with that money that, again, I think could go to benefiting my career much more than just owning this camera would. And this camera is gonna do pretty much everything that this camera could. You know, that's the thing with film, is like, the cameras are just boxes, essentially, that hold a lens on there and that you can load film into. You know, the most important thing with film photography is the film stock that you use and the lens that you use. It's not like a digital camera where the sensors are different and each manufacturer has different color science. And so, as much as I love the experience of using this camera, I can take pretty much the exact same photos with this camera. And this camera was given to me by my grandpa. So like, I didn't pay anything for this. I can buy a lens for like $150 and then make a lot of money off of this sale. That's kind of it. So again, I love this camera. It's been an absolute joy to use, and unfortunately I'm selling it. And I know for a fact that I will have another Leica M body in the future. This is not like a forever goodbye to the Leica M system. This is just like a see you later, you know, because I do love this camera, but I just think as of right now, it's the money that I have in this camera could be spent in much better ways that would then go further to, or in much better ways that would then go to progress my, you know, photography, filmmaking, and YouTube career more than just this single camera can. And I think that is where I'm going to end this video. If you guys like this video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It really does help me out a lot. And if you like this video, please consider checking out some of the other videos on my YouTube channel. If you want to see more of my work that's not here on YouTube, though, I will leave my Instagram on the screen right now, as well as a link to my Instagram and my website in the description below. On that note, I am going to end the video now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.